All right, so I seen this article on Yahoo Finance, and I thought I just had to talk about it. Bill Gates pulling in nearly $500 million in annual dividend income. Here are five stocks generating the most cash flow for his portfolio. So, for starters, I would say that I have a position in every single one of these companies. I'm not necessarily saying they're great. Do your own due diligence as far as that goes, but I do like every single one of these companies. So again, the five are Canadian National Railway, Microsoft, obviously that's the least surprising, Waste Management, Caterpillar, and Deere. And again, you'll notice that these are all very well established, mature companies. Now, my style of investing, my strategy when it comes to investing is very similar to this, in that I want to buy companies that are either in the early to mid stages of growth, that have a small dividend. They're going to grow that dividend, let's say 10-15% per year for the next 20 or 30 years. Those are the kind of companies that I want to own and I want to buy. I do have some companies that don't pay dividends. I do have a decent position in indexes, which I plan to, I plan to hold a decent position in, I already do, but I want to continue to grow it in QQQ and RSP. And then once I have enough to sell covered calls, I would just continue to sell covered calls and roll those calls. And the same thing goes for these two. So the reason that I talk about this is that this is obviously insanely impressive. Like, I don't think there's another investor on the planet. I think Berkshire gets a little bit more, but again, that's an entire company. That's not just Warren Buffett. So again, this is as far as individuals goes, I don't think there's anyone else getting $500 million a year in dividends, right? And again, all of these are growing. Like, all of these are growing every single year. So let's check out some of these companies just to kind of point out what exactly I'm talking about here. So as far as CN goes, again, current dividend of just under 2%, right? But again, they're growing at 11.6% per year. The payout ratio is only 40%, right? So again, that's exactly what I like to see. If you go back 10 years, again, the dividend yields about just under 5%. If you go back 20 years, right, you have a dividend yield of about 23%, right? Just crazy returns that you're getting for holding this company for that long, right? Let's check out Microsoft here. Right, so again, Microsoft, the current dividend yield is only 0.8%. Right? But let's go back. Again, they're growing that 10% per year. If you go back to 2013, right, if you bought this company 10 years ago, you would have a current dividend yield of 8.4%. Right? Let's go back 20 years, right? You would have a dividend yield of about 11%. Right? So again, another example of an easy double-digit yield on cost. And again, that's not even including the growth that you would get on top of that, right? So let's check out Caterpillar here. And again, like I say, I do have positions in every single one of these, either directly or indirectly through indexes. Again, current yield is just over 2%, but again, they're growing that 8% per year. Again, go back 10 years, you have about a 6% yield on cost. You go back 20 years, you have about a 13% yield on cost. Again, just very good returns. Let's check out Waste Management here. Again, so current yield 1.6%. They're growing that 8% per year. Again, 10 years ago, the yield on cost was about 6.5% roughly. And then 20 years ago, your yield on cost was about 10.8%, right? The last one is Deere. Right, so Deere current yield is 1.4 at 6%. Historical yield on cost, again, 10 years ago, you got about a 6.5% yield on cost, and then 20 years ago, you have a 16.7% yield on cost, right? So again, that is my point when it comes to investing, and why I believe this investing strategy is so good. because, number one, in a lot of ways, it's safer than just buying the index, right? Because you're going to get better returns. And my guess is that the beta on these companies is probably safer than the index or less volatile. I mean, for sure when you have waste management in there, right? So again, I'm not necessarily saying you buy these companies specifically, even though I do like every single one of them. This is the kind of investing that I want to do. My long-term strategy is buy companies that have low yields, right? Another thing you notice about these companies, and this is something that I preach all the time, is that when it comes to dividend investing, you don't want to get caught, looking at high current yields, because a lot of those are not sustainable. And if they are, well, maybe you have a falling share price. You want companies that have low yields but are growing them consistently, because if that's your goal, if you're investing for the long term, you would not or should not care about what the current yield is, because it's irrelevant. You're looking for long-term growth, and that's the kind of company that you want if your goal is long-term growth, right? So that is my strategy, right? Buy companies that are going to grow their yields over time, and then when you have enough shares, sell covered calls, roll the covered calls, use that money to reinvest into the same company if you like it, or new companies if you have better opportunities. That is my strategy. I also want to have, I'd say, maybe 20-30% in indexes and do the exact same thing, right? That's just what I believe. And I think it would be very successful, because a lot of people have this idea that, I'm gonna invest for growth, and then when the time comes, I'll switch to investing for income. But it's like, if you perfect this strategy, which I don't think it's all that hard either, you don't need to worry about switching for income, because you'll have enough from your dividends and your covered calls, right? And if you do this in a tax-free account, that is just the cherry on top, right? Now again, everybody's not going to be able to be Bill Gates, obviously, but I mean, I think it's perfectly realistic that your average person can have a $1 million portfolio in 30 years and make $100,000 a year on that. I think that's completely realistic for vast majority of people, right? So again, I'd love to hear what other people think about this. Please comment, like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.